Hello and welcome to this edition of Resource PNG. In tonight's program, we talk about the Port Moresby Stock Exchange and learn about how PNG fits into the global stock market. We also talk to a National Research Institute researcher, Dr. Michael Onagi, about what a small community called Domel in the Highlands region has done to empower itself. But first up, we talk carbon trade. Global warming is a major concern the world over, but what can we do to minimize our carbon footprint? We talked to NRI's researcher, Nalal Bigading, about how carbon trade can benefit PNG.
Good evening, sir. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and the research, especially the field that you research on?
I do work on climate change, environmental sustainability, mainly work to do with carbon trade, RED, and other environmental issues as well.
Okay, with regard to RED, if you can explain further on that?
RED is reducing emissions from deforestation and degradation of forests, and it is the tool that we want to use to trade carbon through our forest.
Okay. All right. Now, sustainability is regarded in terms that include not just practices tied to economic development, but also well-being and social integration, community building, social support, as well as infrastructure. And Papua New Guinea, in some ways, is working to improve the standard of living through sustainable development programs. As a researcher with NRI, where do you see this going?
Many sectors have been trying to carry out sustainable development in Papua New Guinea, but actually the term itself is a very broad term, and it has three pillars: the economic pillar, the social pillar, and the environmental pillar. And for sustainable development to work in Papua New Guinea, you've got to have these three pillars working together. You cannot have one, because it's more or less like a three-legged chair. You cut one, the chair will always fall, or the stool will always fall. So if we want to implement sustainable development in Papua New Guinea, we cannot do it as a on a sectoral basis. We have to do it as an integrated and holistic approach that the whole country has to be part of. You've got to take people from the mining, you take people from the forestry sector, the agriculture sector, the landowners, NGOs, everybody put them on a table and let's set the targets and indicators, and then we work towards those. If you don't do that, I'm sorry, sustainable development has been evading Papua New Guinea for years. Even people, there are sectors that try to do sustainable development on a smaller scale, but it's not having any impact on the country. You look at PNG Sustainable Development, they're doing a good job. They've got the money, they put that in sovereign wealth fund, they're taking it in, they're going out, they're developing the Western province, but they're also putting those money into other provinces as well. And we hear David Sode every time apologizing to people in, example, the Chimbu province, say, I can give you this much. Like, the money belongs to the people of Western province. Now that is for the money that is in the sovereign wealth fund is for the Western province people and the Oktedi mine itself. What about the rest of the country? There are minings everywhere. There are forestry projects everywhere. Where's all the money going? That money is not being put into other uses. So if we do it the way PNG Sustainable Development is doing it, then we can actually say that we are doing sustainable development in Papua New Guinea. Otherwise, what PNG Sustainable Development is doing is on a very small scale. It's not. It's not helping the rest of Papua New Guinea. So Mr. Sode has to apologize every time saying that, sorry, I can give you this much because the money belongs to them. Now, if we can do that with LNG, if we can do that with mining, if we can do it with agriculture, forestry, and even carbon trade itself, you take the money, you put it in a sovereign wealth fund, it grows, you take it and you develop the country either in the health sector, the agriculture sector, or whichever sector we want to develop, or education sector, then that's sustainable development. Otherwise, most of the development that are taking place right now are unsustainable.
Okay. With regard to implications of customary land reforms on carbon trade and RED, what do you think about this whole thing?
Since 2009, there were two pieces of legislation that were passed. One is the Incorporated Land Group Amendment Act, and the other one is the Customary Land Legislation Voluntary Act. We have to voluntarily register your land. Now, those two acts have been passed. Those two acts do not replace any of the Land Act or any of the Natural Resource Acts that already exist. example, the forestry laws or the mining act. These two acts do not replace them. What they're simply doing is this: if you incorporate a land group, the customary landowners then incorporate the land group, and then they register their customary land, and then that is the time those laws will come into effect. Otherwise, they cannot be taken as being effective or to come into play because the land is still under customary law. So those two pieces of legislation actually do that. They take those, they make those laws really work. So when you register a piece of land for carbon trade or RED itself, the land laws and the natural resource laws will come into play at that time. That is when the customary landowners' rights are suspended for whatever period the project is going to. For example, for RED, if you want to trade carbon for 5 years, for 5 years, the rights of the forest owners to go in and do gardening or do whatever activity in that area that has been registered for carbon trade is suspended. They'll have to wait until after 5 years, and then they will come on and say, okay, let's renew the agreement, or we cancel the agreement, we want to go back and use our land.
Don't go away. After the break, Mr. Biggeding explains what PNG can gain from preserving our natural forests. Much of PNG is covered by untouched virgin rainforests. So how can landowners make the best of their land and preserve their natural environment? The National Research Institute is looking at how they can assist.
Okay, to further explain on those two acts that you have, the Natural Resource and the Land Act, for our viewers' sake, if you can just clarify what those both acts mean.
Well, the Land Group Incorporation Amendment Act is actually 2009. Is actually it requires the landowners to incorporate a land group, and that group becomes more or less a entity which you can use to do business. And when you incorporate that land group, you basically register your land with the your incorporated land group with the lands department and other relevant government institution, and it's recognized as a business group that can do business on behalf of the customary landowners. Okay, with the Customary Land Registration Voluntary Act, all you have to do is mark out the land that you really want to do business on. You don't have to register every piece of land that you have. You can have 1 million hectares, but you can only register maybe half of that. 500,000 hectares you want to do for carbon trade. So that's the only piece of land that you have to register, because it costs money to register a lot of land. So what is really required for business can only be registered. Whatever is not required for that, you want to use it for hunting, gardening, whatsoever, it should be kept as customary land. Basically, those two acts work that way.
Explains it. Could you just explain how carbon trade can benefit our people, especially in the rural parts of the country?
Okay, in the most of the projects that have come and gone in Papua New Guinea, especially with logging and others, you see, in logging, you just go into a forest area and you mark it out. You don't actually give the title to the landowners. You actually mark it out and say, this is your land, so we're going to get all the timber that is here, we'll pay you. What is done is the forestry company comes in, they start logging, they pay the people based on the royalties, timber that royalties based on and that's it. Once the project is finished, the company moves out, the people are back to square one. With carbon trade, we want to see it continue. So what actually under the new amendments that have been made on customary land, we want carbon trade to continue after 5 years. So in that process, we want people to get money for using their land for carbon trade. So actually they will get land rent as well. In the past, you don't get land rent in forestry. They don't, the company that comes in doesn't pay land rent. It pays the people based on royalty. With the new amendments, with carbon trade, we want to see people getting land rents, and there may be some additional benefits such as levies that some benefit of that has to go to the landowners. And with carbon trade itself, after 5 years, after contract expires in 5 years, then they can get the whole lot. But in the meantime, we want to see people getting some land rent, so they see some benefit of it, coming out of it. And they see that my land is actually earning me money, rather than people sit and wait for carbon trade money for 5 years. Somebody will get up and say, forget about carbon trade, let's go back to logging. They're bringing a logging company. And we don't want that to happen. So with carbon trade, we actually want to see people benefiting from their land, and we see the land being used continuously for the same purpose.
Okay, and how do you see carbon trade contributing to the economic growth of this country?
Well, at the moment, nothing is coming in. We are talking about it every now and then. So what we really want to do is we want to see carbon trade take off in this country under the new reform, land reforms. And we are taking it as part of what we are doing with land development within the cities and towns, especially customary land that has to be developed for housing and all. So we're doing the same thing. And we call that a greenfield sort of project. So greenfield within real estate, greenfield within carbon trade. And there's a lot of money in carbon trade. And that's why we have a lot of people out there trying to be carbon brokers and carbon consultants. There's a lot of money in it. Even a country like Indonesia, they've been given some $1 billion US just to start up carbon trade work, or even climate change work itself. But they haven't met some of the conditions that were set by the United Nations. So they're still struggling. But in this country, we want to see it move forward, even without what United Nations is going to give us. We want to see it, the government take the initiative, and let's move with it through the land program, and let's get it out. And we want to see more money pouring into the country. We want to see landowners becoming rich people, not just individuals. Clans and villages, we want to see development going into villages.
So how long do you think it will take to get this all sorted and carbon trade actually started in Papua New Guinea?
Well, I'm looking at about the next 3-4 years. It needs a lot of work, especially that there's a lot of technicalities in carbon trade as well. How do you measure carbon, and how do you quantify the soil carbon and carbon that is actually in the trees itself? We need to develop some technical things that have to go along with it, and that will take us quite a while. I would presume it's about 3-4 years we should get the thing going.
All right, well, that sounds like quite a lot of work to do.
Yeah, quite a lot of work.
All right, thank you so much for your time on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks. It seems carbon trading may be something worth looking into. When we return, we'll talk commodities. Commodities, stock prices, and stock exchange. Most companies involved in the extractive industry in Papua New Guinea are connected to these words one way or another. I talked to BSP Capital's Head of Equities and Corporate, Michael Ryan, to find out more about the Port Moresby Stock Exchange. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Eunice.
So let's have a talk about the Port Moresby Stock Exchange. When did it start and what does it do?
The Port Moresby Stock Exchange began operations in 1999, and the main reason for stock exchanges, not just here but anywhere in the world, is pretty much to raise fresh capital for new companies, and alternatively to add additional capital further down the track when a company has already been established.
So how many companies are actually registered on the stock exchange?
There's currently 19 on the Port Moresby Stock Exchange. You could probably really say 18 at the moment, because one of the companies that is listed there, called Metal Storm, it went into liquidation in Australia approximately 10 days ago. We're just not quite sure what the final wash-up of that company is going to be yet, but at present still 19, but looks likely to be 18.
So this companies, how do they qualify to get on the stock exchange?
Look, there's some fairly rigorous things that have to be done to list on the stock exchange. Certainly in the first instance, the first person they would contact would be a stockbroker, which I am. and have been for over 30 years. And then if they're doing a new listing on a stock exchange, the broker will then put together a prospectus, which I imagine many of your viewers will understand what a prospectus is, which outlines all the data and details of the companies involved. And then that also has to be an approved product, both by the Port Moresby Stock Exchange and also by the Securities Commission of Papua New Guinea. And the reason for that is that some fairly bad companies can sneak through unless they have this proper regulatory environment on which to act. So we're very diligent in making sure that we meet those requirements.
Right. So there are several different companies registered on the stock exchange. There's the mining and petroleum companies from the mining and petroleum sector like Newcrest Mining Limited and Oil Search. And then you have other companies like New Britain Palm Oil, also City Pharmacy Limited and Steamships. What kind of factors influences the changes in their share prices?
Look, there are very many and varied things that affect share prices, but the one that probably stands out right at the very top is profitability. If a company makes profits, its share prices will increase accordingly. But there's also other factors that come into play there too. It can be, for argument's sake, you just talked about retail. If the money supply within a country is quite small, you'll find that the retail sector is not going so well if people aren't spending, or is there a lack of confidence in spending within a country. So you could then have a net effect that a retailer may go down. But certainly on the fact of City Pharmacy, its retail numbers look particularly good. So please don't put that condition on that company, because it's a wonderful retailer and doing fantastically in Papua New Guinea at the present time. But just also, when you look past that, there's also commodity prices. If the price of gold goes down, the profitability of a gold company will reduce, and therefore its share price will reduce. So there are many and varied factors, but that's just a couple to put it into some sort of a context for you.
So within this year, what would be some of the causes of the major fluctuations in share prices?
Probably the main cause on the Port Moresby Stock Exchange for any fluctuations in this 12-month period has been commodity prices around the world. In particular gold. At the beginning of the year, gold was really trending up towards the $2,000 US dollars per ounce mark. I think it got to 1930. It's now back at 1540. So as you can see, people were determining that that company was going to go much higher in share price because of a higher commodity price. That price is now reduced by about $400 an ounce, and the net effect of that is share price comes down accordingly. Probably one of the worst affected on the market in Port Moresby would be Newcrest Mining. It is the second largest gold miner in the world now, and there have been obviously revisions to their profitability because the prices are coming down, and that has affected their share price as well. So, but it's got to a point now where we probably consider it very, very good buying, because I won't talk in Kina, I'll talk in Australian dollars, because that's where its main listing is. That stock has been as high as $42.50 at its peak when gold was up around 1900. It's now down to $22.
So it's kind of halved its size.
Basically halved in share price, and the profitability is not going to be that bad. So we're actually recommending at the present time that you should actually be picking up a few more of those at those levels.
Right. So how can people buy shares in these companies, and what are your requirements if people wanted to invest in them?
It's a fairly similar requirement virtually anywhere in the world now to buy shares. You approach a stockbroking firm, of which there are two in Papua New Guinea, Kina Securities and BSP Capital, of which I work for. The regulatory environment tells us that we must get quite a bit of detail now on the applicant. So if you do come into our office and apply, to buy shares, we do require quite a bit of information about you, who you are, where you're from. We need a passport or a driver's licence or some sort of identification, and that's for an individual. For a company, we would require a copy of your certificate of incorporation of company from the IPA and other various pieces. But overall, that is the crux of what you initially have to start doing, and then pretty much within about 2 days, your account will be opened, and we can begin trading. And the way that we manage that then is we contact the client, and so your account is established. We're ready to start operating, and they will forward funds into our account, which we will identify as their funds. And after that point, we move on to purchasing the shares through the Port Moresby Stock Exchange.
So, say from the time you started operating, how have Papua New Guineans reacted to the stock exchange?
Well, I'll tell you, back in 1999 when it began, it had absolutely no clients because that was the beginning time. It has now moved on, obviously some time since that, about 13, 14 years thereabouts. I know at my firm we have 6,500 clients who buy shares in Papua New Guinea, of which 4,500 of them, only because we know their email addresses and such, we send out emails to every one of those every day to 4,500 clients every day with all of our information from what happened in overnight markets around the world, any of the research products that we produce, we being the only company in Papua New Guinea that produces stockbroking research on all the companies listed on the stock exchange, and others for that matter. So it really does show that it's grown quite quically. We'd like it to grow faster, but as you well know, most of that's about education, and that does take some of our time. And we do work with the Port Moresby Stock Exchange, who holds 3 or 4 of these meeting dates around the country every year, where we probably visit between 4 and 6 local centres each time. So somewhere between 20 and 25 centres would be visited each year by the Port Moresby Stock Exchange, together with the share brokers. And also the central bank, because they obviously have an interest, because they register stockbrokers. They the registration area, and also it allows people from the central bank to explain to these investors how to invest into treasury bills, bonds, and inscribed stock, which is also another major source of income for Papua New Guineans.
So these 6,000 people that you have on the stock exchange, where exactly are they putting most of their money into? Which companies are?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, if you want to call it something there, Eunice. They invest fairly much across the board. What's happened, I think, in the past, people haven't really understood which companies or who they should have invested into, because there's never been any research written on them. Now, we write research on every stock listed on the stock exchange now, so people have a very, very good idea as to which are the ones, because we put a buy recommendation on that stock, or if we don't think it's going so well, we say, reduce your exposure to that. So people can have a very firm and committed idea upon where they're going to put their well-earned funds.
Now you know a little bit about the stock exchange. Join us for more after the break. Commodity prices are influenced by a number of factors. Recently, metal prices were affected by reports that the Chinese economy was slowing down. Head of Equities and Corporate at BSP Capital, Michael Ryan. Now that we've talked about the Port Moresby Stock Exchange, how does it tie in with the other world markets?
Well, look, the Port Moresby Stock Exchange sort of is a little bit in the image of the Australian Stock Exchange, or the ASX, as many people know that. The reason being that in the sort of 2 years leading up to the stock exchange being formed here, there was a lot of meetings and many people discussing and putting all of the proper programs and such into place. So it's styled very much upon the Australian Stock Exchange, which isn't all bad, because the Australian Stock Exchange is well recognised as being one of the better run stock exchanges globally. I think also we've been able to pick up a lot of information from the knowledge of the people down there, so that the staff and people of the stock exchange here are actually competent, capable and good at doing their jobs.
So how does the stock market relate to commodity prices like crude oil and gold and coffee?
Well, I suppose we touched on this a little earlier, Eunice, but the price of commodities affects the price of shares. That's it. I mean, if the price of copra, for argument's sake, coming out of Madang falls 20%, well, you'd be quite certain that companies that are dealing in copra will have a lower share price quite swiftly after that, because the research that we do into these companies, we have to determine how long is that copra price going to stay down there, and will it affect the profitability of the company as the year goes along. So we forecast a year in advance always. Stockbrokers work 6 months further down the track than what's actually happening right now. We tend not to worry too much what's happening right now, so long as it meets the requirements of what we think is going to happen in another 6 or 8 months' time. Sometimes you won't even see the share prices change at all. But usually they'll come down. But coffee, cocoa, anything that you have, the price of beef, if there's a drought, there won't be as many cattle around. So the price of cattle is going to go up. You have a poor wheat crop, the price of you buying your wheat bix is going to go up, because it costs them more to buy less product. So it's all interrelated, and in fact, when you put all of the commodities together around the world that are traded, particularly on the New York Stock Exchange and the Chicago Board of Trade, that's where the very vast majority of all commodities in the world get traded. It adds up to something like, 57 or 60 different commodities right around the world that get repriced every single day of the year.
That's a lot of information.
Indeed it is.
So there's been a noticeable change in the world prices because of reports that the Chinese economy is slowing down. Is that true, and will it affect the Port Moresby stock prices at all, or stock exchange prices? Yes.
Yes is not the answer to your last question. Yes, there have been changes in the growth pattern of China. You've only got to look back about 10 or 12 years ago. China came sort of almost in this modern non-fighting revolution, where it was going to, and the politicians decided it was time to get China moving. And China has moved very quickly in that time. Look, for about the last 7 or 8 years, China has had GDP growth, gross domestic product growth, or the growth of that nation. It's been running at between 15 and 17% per year. PNG runs at somewhere between about 7.5 to 9.5, depending upon which year we talk about. Well, you've got to recognise this is growing at double that pace, and it has had a massive influence on prices, commodity prices, all sorts of things right around the world. There's this massive demand within China, and that is the driver that's really created big changes. So the demand that they've had, particularly for iron, steel, iron ore, which goes into all of those, copper, amazingly, the copper price has more than doubled in the last 5 years. And the reason being that around about 100 kilos of copper goes into every new house or every new apartment, and that's just for your hot water piping and stuff like that. Now, you came to a country that had absolutely pretty much zero growth, that's growing at 15%, it will affect the entire world commodity market, which it has, and push them up very high. Now, in the last, just in the last 12 months, it's saying after that massive initial spurt that we've had, we're expecting it to slow down to somewhere like 7.5%. Well, I could tell you, if I lived in any country in the world that was growing consistently at 7.5% for a long period of time, I'd be an extremely happy man. So I think we overcooked it on the upside, but now it's coming back to a very, very sensible level. And I would call that good, steady, ongoing growth. And I think that is far better for China than this massive spikes that have currently been happening.
All right. So will it affect us in any way?
Oh, of course. I'd expect the net effect on the Port Moresby Stock Exchange to be very slight. One, because there are no listed Chinese companies on the Port Moresby Stock Exchange. And the second point is it will be that general effect that we've spoke about a little earlier. It'll be very much commodity price driven, and if commodity prices do start to come back further from this point, we will see some effect, particularly coming on the resources stocks that are listed on the Port Moresby Stock Exchange.
Right. So the international stock market reports have shown that share prices dropped going into the weekend.
Yes.
Now, why does this happen, and does it affect the mining and petroleum sector?
Well, there's a funny thing that most people probably don't know. Share brokers and big traders, people that like taking a big bet on the market, we actually go and buy stock on our own behalf for the firms that we work for. And I remember when I worked for Barclays Bank in London. I worked in London for 5 years. I ran a trading book there for the firm where I'd buy $200 million worth of stock on a Monday, and if it went up during the week, well, all well and good, because you'd sell it and take a profit. If you were still holding some of that money, or if not all of that money, by the Friday afternoon, well, you'd say, well, I'm not going to hold that over the weekend, I'll sell it all now. So you go and sell it all. And the reason for that being is that if you just do some simple maths in your head, and I'll ask all your viewers to get a pen and paper and write this down, because you put $200 million US at an overdraft rate, because that's the rate that we'd be paying usually, at an overdraft rate, call that of 12 or 13%. $200 million over 2 days, holding $200 million for 2 days over a Saturday and a Sunday, oh, I can tell you it comes to about 28,000 US dollars, call it 60,000 kina. That's just the cost of holding that money over the weekend. So you sell it. So you sell the stock and you come back the following Monday and you go and put another 200 million in, and you run it that way. So yes, it does have an effect, but that's why you tend to see markets go up usually on a Monday or a Tuesday, and you invariably see markets drift away, particularly in the afternoon on a Friday, and that's where all the traders and brokers and such are selling out of their positions, so as not to carry this expensive money over the weekend.
So Mr. Ryan, is there anything else you'd like to talk about with regards to BSP Capital?
Well, BSP Capital is funnily enough, a lot of people may not know it, but New Britain Palm Oil used to actually own this firm a number of years ago, and it was purchased from New Britain Palm Oil when it was called Capital Stockbrokers in those days by Bank South Pacific, and we're a 100% wholly owned subsidiary of the bank, and which has actually been a great benefit to us, because with much respect to Ian Klein and the senior management of the bank, they've really pushed us along and enables us to do a lot of extra work that we wouldn't have been able to do as a smaller operation, because it requires a lot of capital. We've just completed putting in a 9 million kina stockbroking system and funds management system. We're training up staff the entire time. We have a great relationship with Macquarie Bank Stockbroking in Australia, where I send my employees down there to be trained by probably one of the best stockbrokers in Australia. and that comes from both research people that we've talked about already to my share dealers. So everybody, we're trying to really lift the quality of the service up here, and also the amount of knowledge that our people are required to have. You know, to be a stockbroker and to have what's called a dealing licence, which you get from the Port Moresby Stock Exchange, each single person that sells shares. There's a thing where you have to pass by 75%. Well, all of my lads on my desk and ladies, they have to pass 90% plus, or they don't work for me, because if they've forgotten 25%, that's not good. I'll give them a go at somewhere around about 90%. So we work very hard to better the staff. We've got 39 employees. There's 2 white faces there, and there's 37 local people. And I encourage anybody that's listening to, if you train your staff up, you'll have loyal staff and you'll have the best. And I've got the best, and I'm extremely pleased with them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan, for a very informative discussion about the stock exchange and share prices.
My pleasure, Eunice. Thank you.
When we come back, we talk about a place in the New Jawaka province called Domil. A community that has made its mark in showing how things should be done is Domil. A villager once noted that it's difficult for the government to come and develop us. If we don't do anything, we will not go anywhere. We should do something, and the government will play its part. Here is NRI's Senior Research Fellow, Dr. Michael Unagi, to tell us a little bit more about the community that has empowered itself in Domil. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Eunice, and thank you, viewers.
So tell us, what is the institutional strengthening pillar? What does it encompass?
Currently, we have 3 pillars, or research pillars at National Research Institute. The first one is the people's pillar. The other is the wealth creation pillar. And then we have the institutional strengthening pillar. That is just following the pillars from the Vision 2050. So the research programs are structured according to Vision 2050. Formerly, we had the disciplines like social and political studies, legal and political, social and environmental, and education studies. But then, so the institutional strengthening pillar is one of the pillars within the new current arrangement of our research program.
So what kind of research has NRI done on the community?
The research on community was started in end of 2008, and so it's almost around 3 to 4 years as a research program. And I was calling to lead the program, and so far we had already made 3 publications on community issues of community, and we have done 1 case study, which is the Domil community in the New Jawaka province, a very interesting community that we'll talk about later, and also developed a community development framework. So it's a new program, but we have some good publications in place. So, and we should start to extract ideas from the publication and then do some more evidence-based research in communities.
So we talked about this Domil community and the case study that was done on it. Why was the study done on that place?
This is one NRI's commission research to look into a detailed study of a community. So that's why we looked around the country, and we thought that Domil was the best model to do a research. So I decided to go there in early 2009 and did a case study of the Domil community. And I found out some very, very interesting issues about community-driven development at Domil. And I think they've really gone to find some answers to to the issues of community development that I've raised earlier, the issue of powerlessness, the issue of poverty, and the issue of ignorance. I think they have done quite well in order to address these issues in their own way, but they have done it very well. And what I found in Domil was that they have a very established community government. And what interesting about it is that I met the chairman of the community government. His name is John Wyme, and he showed me a diagram on the wall, and it is the Parliament House and the village houseman on the other side. The Parliament was drawn in a very big sketch, whereas the village houseman was very, very small. And he told me that, all the power in the houseman has disappeared, and it's all gone into the house tambaran. And then he showed me the other contrasting picture. And here the Parliament has a very, very small drawing, and the Domil houseman and the village has a very big drawing. And I just want to reverse that process. We want to bring power back into our community. We want to feel that we have authority, we can make decisions for ourselves, we can stand up and fight for our own development. And he said we can be also agents of change. So we need to change this, bring power away from Parliament back into and start this local government sort of thing. So I thought, my goodness, that was the thing I was looking for. The people can have a very effective community government. And the other thing about Domil was also that they, apart from the community government, they also have this resource center. And they have what is called an information bank, a financial bank, and a seed bank. And this is where the people go in and they get all this information. Like the information seed bank is very, very good because they have all the materials of educating the community, whether it's in agriculture, it's in sewing, it's in hygiene, nutrition, or health, whatever. So they train people there. But the history of the whole development, I'll come to it later, but it's very interesting. And the other thing I found too also was the self-reliant economic development in Domil. Something similar to what we call it the social economy. It is why people who try to create some group or cooperative and society and a collective sort of saving in order to help themselves. So I found these three establishments very interesting, and it is address the broad issues that I've been highlighting earlier.
Okay. So where exactly is this place Domil located?
Well, Domil is located in the new province, Juwaka province. It's between Bans and Nondugul, a kilometer from Nondugul sub-district, and almost 3.5 kilometers away from the Okug Highway. So it is almost to the eastern end of Juwaka, close to the Chimbu border. Yeah.
The Domil community has become very well organized. When we return, we find out how they were able to create such a sustainable approach to life. The Domil concept has transformed the lives of their people. Other communities can learn from this. Let's continue with that interview. So there were development programs introduced in that area, and these programs, what exactly do they include? You said resource center, there was community governance, and are there others?
There are other programs there as well, but I'll go back to the history of the program itself so that it makes our viewers a bit clear on what we are talking about. The program started in 1992 with a tutor nurse called Bernard Goon. And with the help of the Nazarene Church, they were doing what is called a community preventative health care. So instead of, they were saying that there were so many illnesses in the community, so he went home to teach, preventative health care in the village. So the program started from this preventive health care into having a village bird attendants, and they would also have what you call medical orderlies, village trained. They would go around giving medicine to sick people, just basic illnesses like cough and fever, malaria, and all that. So it started with the health program, and then later they went into development programs like agriculture, coffee production, and then they also have a village, what they call a building construction, where they build semi-permanent houses, and they have also other programs like the Nari program, where they're introducing new crops into the highlands, and then also the newly what you call what is the agriculture term for it, I'm not so sure, but so they are testing new crops there in Domil. So there are so many progress going on there, and they also have the inland fishing going on as agriculture. So yeah, quite a lot of good programs going on.
What has been the progress in them?
Since the case study, they have two developments now. Now they are doing what is called bringing water into the community, because there's been a problem with safe drinking water. So I think with the assistance of European Union, the community provided labor themselves. So now they are able to bring in water supply to the village. That was the new development since the last time I was there. And the recent one is now they are constructing a cassava factory, and that will really boost the income of the community there. They can extract cassava for either using as a flour, or they could do starch out of it, or a biofuel. There's a lot of possibilities, but they have done the construction already, and I think in March I was invited to go for the opening, but I didn't turn up, but I think the plant is open now. So these are two recent developments in Domil. It is through their own hard work and commitment that they see the community growing, and people they are building from strength to strength.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Dr. Onagi, regarding community empowerment?
There is a trend now in the country that we think that we can build everything on money, and I think it is also true for the language of politicians and bureaucrats. But they forgot the basic thing that what the resource they have, and they only forgot about is the people. And I've done case study in Domil, and I know that people have very, very great potential. And I will just tell you one story. It's a very interesting story. Of one young fellow, he was smoking marijuana all the time in his lifetime before the program in Domil. And he felt completely useless. But when the program came in, and the idea about the inland fish farming, that fellow went in, and he was a successful farmer. Mm-hmm. And then they called him to go to some other communities in Tari and other places to teach them how to do fish farming in their communities. And he was flown from Magen to Tari, and he said that was the first time he has ever flown in an aeroplane. It was his chance, and from the fish he was able to go to Lufa and pay his own bride price for a girl in Lufa, in the Asian Islands, because he said all the girls in Juaga, know me as a drug body. So I have to go somewhere else to look for a for a wife. And then I asked him this one question, and I think it's very, very important. And I told him, "Do you want to go back to your former way of life and doing things?" He said, "No. He said, if I do that, they will come and steal my fish, steal my coffee garden. They would even take my wife away. So I won't stop doing all these crazy things I've done before." So there is some kind of a change within that person, and we also should remember that community development also, and then it's personal development. It's vice versa. So I think we are putting too much emphasis here on trying to develop a human being, a person, but a person grows in a community, and community can also sustain a person. So we have to keep that in mind when we are trying to talk about development in the country. And I'm also interested in doing more evidence-based research in communities to see what's out there, what's interesting stories that we can learn from our people. The strength of our people is the thing that we should rely on in trying to develop Papua New Guinea.
Thank you very much for your time.
Welcome.
That ends another edition of Resource PNG. You can watch this presentation again online at our Resource PNG page at www.mtv.com.pg. And if you have any suggestions, please send them through to resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Until next time, have a good week.